Hello and welcome to this week's Beyond the Hub, where I am talking to our head of success, Jem Ruggun. Welcome, Jem. It's been a little while since we've had you on the podcast.
Hello, yes. Hope you're not too rusty at answering questions under pressure.
Absolutely. And it's a perfect time to get you back on because it's the start of a brand new year. People are looking at their HubSpot portals, and that's what we're going to go over today
Yeah.
is actually they should be looking at. So I guess the people that are going to be listening today are most likely HubSpot admins or responsible for their HubSpot portal in some way. And that role has really become a bit more crucial in recent years. And why do you think that is?
I mean, I it's coming up for 10 years since I started using HubSpot. In that time, the transformation of HubSpot is just huge. I mean, back then it was a marketing platform. They launched the CRM in its current format, sort of. Then, so since then, we've got sales, we've got Service Hub, we've got operations, we've got content in a different way than it was then, although it was there in part. And I think just so much has happened that now it's not just that marketing tool that it once was. It is business wide. And in many ways, it's become so crucial to the running of a business. Like it's the way that all those departments align around a common goal and how everything works. It's the central source of data for many businesses. And with that comes that importance of needing to look after it. So rather than it being the head of marketing also keeping an eye on HubSpot, actually it's become that central place that needs to be looked after and is often a huge portion of often an IT budget. It's not just even marketing budget anymore, it's business wide. So yeah, that's why that admin piece is really becoming so important because you still need someone overseeing the portal. But it has to be that one step removed now. It can't be department focused anymore.
No, but you kind of touched on it there with all the different hubs that are now involved. You're more likely to have, two or three hubs. There's not kind of one person that maybe just has the one hub anymore. So there's lots of different departments involved now. So what is that relationship like, or should be like between a HubSpot admin and all the different stakeholders that they work with?
Yeah, ultimately, I think the admin is really that holistic view. They are that person that sees everything. And
Mhm.
I often talk about with the HubSpot portal, you'll have certain teams looking at it with kind of a laser focus. So the marketing team will be looking at the marketing tools and not really thinking about, they might think about the data in the sense of who they're sending stuff to and those leads that have come in. But actually sales are then looking at the deals and the contact data will be viewed from their perspective. So actually the role of that admin is to try and smooth that line and to really get those departments communicating better. I mean, it's a typical thing that marketing and sales used to just hate each other and it never used to work and things like that. But now, if they're using the same system and ultimately they're using the same data and it needs to be a source of truth for everyone to report on it and trust it, you're going to need someone to, it's not a mediation because that makes it sound like every business is chaos, but actually you still need someone to make sure that it's all being used in the same way. And so the role with those departments is often looking at that data as a central place and then looking at how all the departments interact with it and kind of liaising with the different departments when changes are needed, kind of working out how processes need to be implemented. If you have a big product update come out that you need to implement or you need a new custom object or something like that, it's going to hit every department. And rather than everyone kind of just figuring it out on their own, an admin can be that person, that central spokesperson. They could lead a change board, they could lead an implementation team and just try and sew it all together, basically.
And I guess making sure that each of those departments are heard as well, because a lot of time what we see when people are struggling with adoption is that the team are voicing their frustrations, but nothing's kind of being done. So would you say that the admin's that person that can hear them and make those changes?
Yeah, I think it's making sure that everyone's heard and also being an advocate for the platform as a whole. So, um, also if you've got competing decisions, being able to hear them all and actually make a decision that's right for the portal rather than being kind of involved in the politics of the different departments, that can be really useful as well.
Definitely. And we kind of cover all of this in the admin handbook that you wrote for
Yep.
us, which if anybody hasn't downloaded that, I'll make sure to include a link below. But in that you talk about kind of having this holistic approach, but also you kind of go down into all of the different challenges and aspects of being an admin in HubSpot. So one of them is data management, and that's always the one that most people are kind of interested in. So what do you see? What are some of the biggest challenges admins face with clean, accurate data across their portals?
Yeah, it's the topic that I feel boring for always coming back to it, but it is the topic that we always get asked about and we always come back to. And I think the first thing I would often do if I'm putting in a customer's portal and they're asking me about data is I'll create a data dashboard, which we might come back onto later because that's in the handbook. But getting that view of, okay, what's going on? I think that's the first thing that you need to be doing with data is understanding what's happening with your current data set. And actually, then some of the challenges that come out of that are often the same. So it's missing data, messy data, users using the platform in different ways. So then, as a result, creating messy data or things just being incomplete. Those are probably the top ones that often come out if I was to bulk everything together.
And you touched on it a little bit then by saying people doing things in different ways, but what are the causes of those data problems? What's the cause of messy data? What's the cause of inaccurate data?
Going back to kind of what I said earlier, I think a lot of it is if someone is in their role and they're focused on their role and their own KPIs and things like that, they might well be a team player, but actually ultimately we're all guilty of focusing on what we're doing and not thinking of the big picture. The amount of times I've gone into a portal and seen 6 job title properties because someone has gone to create a form and gone, oh, we need a job title property and created it. You then end up with one that's single text, one that's a drop down, one another drop down with different options. So that's where it can get messy very quickly because people are just wanting to get the job done. And if they're short on time, they don't want to go searching for things and they might not be speaking. In many businesses, they might be detached from the decision maker or the person who's looking at the whole portal. So that kind of proliferation of properties can be very quick. With kind of other messy data, I think things like if when you're creating data or importing data, if you haven't got things as required, so you're just lacking, like someone just doesn't put in job title most of the time because they just want to put name, email, and then get on with creating a deal. Like they might not want to put all the information in, but actually for another team, that job title might be crucial, in which case then it's kind of viewed as messy data. There are lots of other reasons. I mean, having kind of duplicate contacts in there, which could easily happen. Of deals without associated companies, that kind of thing. There's so much that can just happen. And not even through malice or anything like that. This is just stuff that just happens when you've got busy users all working on different things.
Yes, and I think one of the ways that you talk about in the handbook to get over that is kind of locking down permissions a little bit. So you mentioned having too many super admins as something to avoid. So what are your kind of experiences with this? How have you encountered permissions being not properly managed before?
The amount of times I've had people just come and I've said, "Oh, so what what are your problems?" And they're just like, "I just everyone just does their own thing." And it's like, well, if you haven't got those permissions locking people down, you have got sales off doing something, marketing doing something else. You've got rogue users all over the place. Like, and if you haven't got a handle on them, then you're going to find it hard to keep a lid on that. And actually, the easiest way to get a handle on it is through permissions. I'm that person that for years I've said don't have many super admins. And it's interesting because now if you go into the security area of HubSpot, there's a security dashboard. Super admins is one of the things they flag. So do you have too many? I, I think often that starts with small businesses that then scale. So if you've got a small business, I can understand kind of if I think back to BabelQuest 10 years ago, like everyone had super admin access in the portal because we were a small team who actually worked on BabelQuest rather than just clients. So like I can see in that situation, you'd start with quite a few super admins and then new people join and you don't think about the permission set. So you just go, oh, I'll just give them super admin. It's easy. And then it grows and grows. And suddenly you've got a big business. And then actually you're impacting reporting because everyone's doing their own thing. So the adding user permissions might not be a popular thing, but actually locking down some of that, I found sometimes the users are actually quite grateful to have permissions taken off them because they aren't going to do something wrong and they can actually ask someone else to do it instead of them. I've seen lots of CEOs who've gone, just take my permissions. I don't need to be able to do it. I just want to be able to see it. So yeah, it can be a tricky one to broach, but I just think rip the plaster off, take those permissions away, and often it makes everyone's life easier.
So what would you advise if, so we can understand with a smaller business, it's a bit more difficult to advise, but let's say there's 30 users in the HubSpot portal. What percentage or what number of those would you recommend as a super admin?
I'd say it's less of a percentage because actually, as things grow, you're looking at a similar number. I'd say probably no more than four. Like if you're looking at a small group, so yeah, I don't think even if it's 30 versus 200, it'd so probably still be saying like you want that course HubSpot admin who is the person that makes decisions, and then you want 1 to 2 backups of if they're not around or if something goes wrong. So yeah, I think in an ideal world, maybe four. But if you're then getting into some of these bigger companies that may be global, you've got different divisions, different subsidiaries, you again, I can't give a percentage because I think it is a case of looking at it pragmatically. So, um, saying, okay, one per subsidiary, and they know that they need to seek permission from the super admin before they make a change. Because ultimately, if you're giving someone super admin access for a department of the business or for a subsidiary, then saying to them, okay, you're being given super admin, but there is a sign off route and there is something you have to, they're more likely to think of the big picture in the portal than the sales rep doing work on a daily basis. Don't give them super admin access, but actually, yeah, give it to a reasonable number. That's why I'm not going to put a number on it. I'm not going to put percentage,
Yeah.
but yeah, just think about it carefully.
And now that there's the core seats pricing model, it changes entirely because maybe the procurement person or the finance person who wanted super admin before because they needed to see everything, well, now they can just have view only, and it does make things a lot easier to lock those permissions down.
Yeah.
It's also a key part of doing your biannual portal audit or anything like that, is to audit these permissions. So we'll also include a link to our portal audit handbook as well for anybody that hasn't seen that one. I'm just moving on slightly because I know that we've we've touched on permissions and super admins, but also the guide talks a lot about automation. And this is another thing that people question quite a lot, and it's what should they be doing? So what are the kind of basic examples that you could share that people should be doing when it comes to automation in the portal?
Yeah, so I was having to think about some of the examples I could bring out, and I think that there are lots of examples that get wheeled out regularly. So, for example, making sure that your first names have a capital letter at the start, or decapitalizing if everyone's written that. Yes, you can do all those things, and if you've got Operations Hub, you can do a lot of that really simply out of the box with those tools. But kind of going a little bit deeper for things that might actually be useful beyond kind of formatting of text and data. One big one that actually I speak about probably on a monthly basis, a different client brings this up, is marketing contacts. And actually I think often I was part of BabelQuest and using HubSpot when marketing contacts came in. So we had to think about this a lot more, about that move from not having that to having to manage your tiers and things. And as a result, if people have come to HubSpot new without that, then they might just not even think about marketing contacts. But actually, the fact that you've got a tier threshold, and if you go over that, then they're going to up your tier and you'll be paying more money for your contacts. It's so crucial to be making sure that you're automating some element of it. For example, and this is often a kind of a surprise element to most clients because they don't think about it, is if they've unsubscribed from marketing, don't have them as a marketing contact. The only reason that they're a marketing contact is so that you can promote ads to them or send them marketing emails. They can still be in the portal if they're a non-marketing contact. Doesn't mean they're not important, but actually having some automation that says if they've unsubscribed, if they're a hard bounce, yeah, then set them automatically to non-marketing. And vice versa, having a list that says if they are a non-marketing contact and they meet some key criteria, and they're not unsubscribed and they're not hard bounced, set them back to marketing. Almost having that flipping around and working and having that as an active list that enrolls in a workflow to change the status, that's really crucial, I think. And you can go deeper with that. Do you want to stop competitors, suppliers, that kind of thing? A lot of people push back on me saying employees, because they might want to send emails to their employees. So in which case they might need to be marketing contacts. But if you don't want to use that for internal comms, then have employees down as non-marketing as well. So that's one. Another one we've actually got a hack on as well is the reallocation of lever contacts. So if you've got levers as users in your portal and you're about to deactivate them, having a workflow that if they've been marked as a lever sets all of their contacts to be reallocated to someone else, that can be really useful. Because if you deactivate them, all you're going to get is it will say contact owner is deactivated. You know,
Yeah.
that's not useful for anyone. So having the ability to reallocate that and have a process behind that is really good. And then I think the other one that kind of plays into data dashboard, which again I think we'll cover, is flagging if key info is missing. So and that's that holistic view again, if you've decided as a business that sector and a set list of sectors is really important for your business, or job title or job function, making sure that that's flagged if it's missing. So you might have a workflow that says they've been created more than a day ago and function is missing or sector is missing, and emailing that to their contact owner to flag that it needs filling out. That can be useful. And I think knowing your key properties that have to be filled out and using workflows to flag that can be helpful. I think the power of using workflows to flag issues with data is maybe underutilized. So rather than waiting and having to chase people down, have a workflow, just send them notifications or set them tasks automatically. It will make their life easier because it's just a quick fix, but it also makes yours because you're not having to like biannual report where you're having to look at, oh, actually we've got 1,000 contacts without this field. They've just been done on a daily basis, and actually that's not so kind of such a bleed on people's time if they've just done it daily.
And what's good about those workflows, I think, is that you can send it to people where they're going to actually see the notification. So we have it
Yeah.
internally where it gets sent to Slack, which is so helpful because
Yeah.
you're more likely to check your Slack than you are maybe your email sometimes when you're getting notifications through. So doing it where your staff are actually spending the most time is really cool. That you can do workflows. I like that one. And so you talked about the data dashboard, but let's dive into it a little bit deeper if people haven't got this in their portal at the moment. So what are the key data points in a data dashboard that people should be kind of monitoring?
The first ones, I mean, it will be tailored to every business, but I try to get them, if it was to build one today, I try to cover all the key objects. So, looking at contacts, companies, deals and tickets. Deals and tickets I always lump together because you might be using one and not the other. You might be using both, but the same reasons come behind both of them. I'd then start with contacts and just go from there. So with contacts, you're looking at unsubscribers, bounces with their bounce reasons, because some can be unbounced. Others, it might have been someone's left without you realizing. So looking at those. And again, that big one is that missing data. You can also do clever things around missing data by source. So that can flag really interesting things. So is it that job function is always missing, but it's always missing when someone has added it straight into the CRM interface? Could a quick fix to that be that you just add it as a required field in the create a contact form? Or is it that it's when someone comes from an integration? So do you need a workflow or do you need to change the data in the other system? So I think flagging source can be really useful with that. And then also with contacts is lifecycle stages. So obviously it requires a bit more work behind the scenes to have your definitions of lifecycle stages and have automation getting that working properly. But actually, if you've then got things being flagged, if looking at the funnel of life cycle stages, if it's looking off or it's not working, that's a really useful thing to see in your data dashboard. Or equally, if a customer, it can flag things like if a contact who is part of a customer doesn't have a life cycle stage, or if things are out of alignment, It's just showing you those red lights that you can then go into settings and make changes based on it. Because ultimately that dashboard should be blank.
Yeah.
Other ones, so looking at companies is kind of similar. Again, mostly important fields. But going into deals and tickets, it could be close dates. Is that in there? Is it overdue? Have they got amount in there? Have they selected the right products? You know, like these core things, like what are the things the teams need to be doing? And the purpose of that data dashboard is just to flag things that you can then go and do other things with. That's what I'd say.
I like what you've done there about it's not just like the numbers on the dashboard. It's not just that. It's the reasons behind them. It's that white space that you're looking at, like the source, where is it coming from? Why is this happening? And fixing those issues, not just the actual data
Yeah.
issue as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people could build a data dashboard and it's just an admin job to go through and fix it. But actually, no, I think the real benefit of it is flagging things that are going wrong. I'll often put an iframe of the workflows at risk tool in there because that shows you if a workflow is breaking regularly as well. And it's a similar thing. It's noticing if things aren't behaving as they should. So definitely.
And I guess a way to fix these issues and things is a lot easier if you've got documentation. And you talk about documentation in the handbook as well and how
Yep.
important it is. So what's your kind of approach to documenting a complex or even just a simple HubSpot setup, especially when people are inheriting a mess?
Yeah, it's kind of two slightly different things there because a mess is a whole other kettle of fish. But we'll come to that. But a documentation in general, I'd always start with the data architecture. So it always comes back to data. Like I said, I sound like a broken record talking about data all the time. But what is your basic data structure? Or have you just got the standard objects? Have you got custom objects in there? Having that documented is really important. Like as much as HubSpot is an out of the box usable CRM, every business will use it slightly differently. Like, what is your definition of when something becomes a deal? What is your definition of how contacts and companies are associated? I've got plenty of clients that maybe have association labels that say, I don't know, that flag a supplier versus the actual end customer or something like that, and they might both be associated to a deal. So having things like that documented, not just core properties and things like that, but also like the interplay between them, association labels, having all that documented, because as much as someone could try and understand that by going into your portal, having it summarized, so if one day you leave or you're on holiday when a new person starts and something breaks, like having it documented is really important. So starting with the data, and I'd then flow into just some other areas. So put natural thing from data would be reporting. Again, use permissions, the portal level setup. So things like what company currency have you chosen? Have you chosen other currencies? How is that used in the system? And some of those other little bits and pieces, like so that it's not just someone's going to have to dredge through the whole portal to find this out. Or if a new starter comes into the team, they can just be handed the documentation and understand how it's been built. Because I think that's the big thing. Because coming to your next bit, which was around messes of portals, that often a messy portal will not have documentation about how it was created. Or if it does in some magical world, then it will be like 5 years out of date and it won't mean anything. So to save yourself from a messy portal, having documentation that is updated, has a date on it, last updated, and is regularly updated is really important. And with messy ones, I'd always just, if you've not got that documentation, start with an audit.
Mhm.
Very similar structure actually, like looking at how's the data structured, how are things being used, looking at the settings, what is and isn't being used, and then starting to almost build out your structure for documentation that then you can create a roadmap to fill it in. So, like, do you need to look at your architecture? Do you need to look at user permissions and almost have the placeholders there that you're going to then go away, figure out, and fill in? Because a messy portal is sometimes you call it a rebuild. Like, it might be literally starting from scratch.
Because it's that why. You don't understand why something's necessarily been done. Whereas if you've got that documentation, at least you understand why the life cycle stages are this and why. this triggers this. But if you haven't got that why, I can understand why people get frustrated and want to start all over again.
And it might like be heartbreaking for some people in the business who went through that initial implementation. They were like, but we did it so perfectly. And it's like, yeah, but it was complex because a lot of people's implementation of HubSpot has to be complex, especially
Mhm.
if you bring in custom object and that kind of thing. It makes perfect sense at the time, but that's after a lot of exploration and building and getting it to work. Like, not everything is simple, especially when you're looking at business wide and you're looking at global businesses, etc. Like, documenting
Write
it
it
is so
down.
important. Yeah,
Write it down.
definitely.
And I guess another thing that changes, um, and is important to keep updated in the documentation, is because of things like the product updates, which they roll out so
Yep.
many. We all know how difficult it is to kind of keep on top of that. So, how do you recommend admins kind of balance testing out these new features and documenting these new features and maintaining their portal stability? Because that's quite important as well.
Yeah. I think the first thing, just because we discussed it, is this is another reason not to have too many super admins.
Mm.
Because if you're getting product updates coming out and people are going, oh, that's a new shiny toy, I'll go and turn that on and then playing with it and it throws everything out. A big one last year, I think it was leads that came out. So
Yeah.
the new object around leads, actually, if you look at that, if you just turn it on, it's quite different to the old model where we just had contacts. So if people had just turned that on and started playing with it, that's quite a shift, and you'd end up with teams using it in entirely different ways. And then you turn on automation, and that could mess up your portal. So I think absolutely use the new product updates. They should always be incorporated, but have some structure about how you do it. And that kind of plays into that having an admin, a HubSpot admin, who can go, yeah, we need these three product updates. These two can be implemented immediately because it doesn't impact anything because they've got that holistic view. They've seen the documentation, they have it in their head. They can immediately go, yep, those two are fine. Sign them off, get them out, tell the team about it. Might just be an email. Whereas they might go, that one, great idea. It solves a whole host of problems, but we need to have a project around it. So at that
Yeah.
point, you might be incorporating it into your roadmap, and looking at that. Equally, HubSpot have a really nice new feature around scheduled for release. So you can actually look at when things are being launched. So it might be that something's been in beta for ages, and you've avoided it because you're like, oh, that causes us a load of problems. But actually seeing that next month it's coming out of beta and you're going to have to look at it, might prompt you to put it into your plan and plan for that. So it's not a surprise when it comes. So I think that's the main thing is take away all the just turning things on all over the place and actually put some structure in and do it carefully.
I like that scheduled for release feature, which also tells you, I think, when things are also being sunsetted, which is
Yeah.
super important because,
Yeah.
for instance, the company insights is
Yeah.
being sunsetted because
This month, I think, isn't it?
I think it is this month, or definitely this quarter, if not this month. And that's something everybody should be aware of because it affects everybody. So that scheduled for release is very
Yes,
underutilized for sure. Um,
definitely.
which kind of brings me on to AI and Breeze. So what role do you kind of see AI tools and HubSpot's Breeze, both the kind of intelligence and the agents and things, playing into the future of portal administration?
I think it in some ways if you are on top of things with your portal and you know how it's structured, you've got it documented, etc., AI can be really useful to help you maintain it. So for example, the Breeze tools around kind of enrichment and being able to add that. Traditionally, a lot of people just use company insights and it's kind of viewed as a staple, but as you say, it's being sunsetted. So using Breeze to enrich data and being able to actually be careful about how it's done. So, like you say, choosing which records can have that enrichment, really helpful. And again, with agents, like if you've got set processes and you know how things are done, then over time you can start looking at, oh, actually, if we use an agent here or if we word a prompt in this way, then actually we can cut the time needed on this task by half or something like that. So I think having the foundations in place and knowing how you do things means you're then more likely to spot ways that AI can help you. And I think that's the key way to do it, rather than going to the AI and going, what could we do with it? It's actually looking at what you've currently got and seeing ways to make things you do faster and more efficient.
So it is your kind of opinion is still be excited about these things, but just be prepared. It's not, it's not going to be the magic solution to everything unless you've got that framework in place
That's the
first.
thing. It's definitely not a magic wand. Like if you've got a messy portal, it's not going to suddenly clean up your portal because of a lot of being able to look at it and go, that's a messy portal. That's in your head. Like you know that's messy. The AI tools in HubSpot are learning as much as they can and they keep picking up with things, but actually you need to read that data and you need to understand it. So making sure that it's as clean as possible, and spotting those gaps that AI could help to fill is really important.
And I was going to ask you a question around maintaining your portal health but also trying to grow your portal. But actually, I think you've kind of answered it there already by saying lay the groundwork.
Yeah, I think that's really crucial. I mean, with everything we do, around new portals and even re-implementations to some extent. Like a lot of it is look at your architecture, look at your user permissions, make sure your settings are right, make sure you've got a process for everything, make sure that your documentation's there. And that's pretty standard for everyone, regardless of how you're using the portal, because you can use all the fun tools and it all works and you can then look at campaigns and actually using everything. But a HubSpot admin really needs to pull all of that back and look at those core foundations. So that will then allow everyone to go on and ace all their goals because you've got the core foundation in place and you're making sure that it's maintained. And I think that's really important.
A really good point that the CRM admin's job or the administrator, whatever they're called in that business, directly impacts everybody else's role. So you've got to get this right. And hopefully today's conversation helped with that and also the handbook that you've written. So I am going to link that down below. That
Yes.
was all of my questions. And I think we've kind of covered the basics of what every kind of admin needs to know heading into 2025. Thank you, Jem, so much for joining us. And I'm sure in 6 months' time or 12 months' time, we'll get you back on to do another one of these because
Yeah.
HubSpot will have changed so much.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. No, it's been really good to chat. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Jem.
Thanks.